Ruby is a young lady who gets up at 3 a.m. every day to join her father Frank and brother Leo to catch fish in the sea. Except for Ruby, they are a fisherman's family with physical limitations. They cannot hear voices. Ruby is the only person in the family who can hear, while her father, mother, and elder brother are all deaf. She goes to school after helping her family catch fish, but owing to job exhaustion, she frequently falls asleep in class. Audra is a buddy of Ruby's. Ruby finds it difficult to make friends at school, and her classmates frequently tease her because she smells like a fish. Ruby is picked up by her parents after school, and she is always humiliated since her deaf parents frequently come to pick her up with very loud music. Ruby's parents have skin problems, so the three of them go to the dermatologist. Ruby has to explain her parents' problems to the doctor. Living in a deaf household has its own set of issues for Ruby, particularly when her family is too loud in most circumstances, such as when cleaning something too harshly or placing items too hard. Ruby, on the other hand, adores her family. Ruby attempted to join the extracurricular chorus at school. During the placement exam, all members were invited to sing one by one. When it is Ruby's turn, their gazes seem to denigrate her, causing Ruby to feel nervous and flee. When Ruby is alone in a lake, she sings with a very good voice, proving that her voice is really good. Ruby understands her parents are having financial issues when she sees them discussing sign language one night. They don't make much money from the fishing industry where they reside. As a result, Ruby comes to mind, as her father is only an expert in his profession and cannot work in another field. Furthermore, fishing laws in the city have never been favorable to fishermen. Ruby tries to visit Mr. B again the next day. Mr. B inquires as to why Ruby fled at the audition. Ruby confesses that she is terrified of being mocked by her peers. Mr. B states that while many individuals have wonderful vocals, not all of them can transmit the content of the music they sing. Since then, Ruby has returned to extracurricular activities, and thanks to her wonderful voice, she can capture the attention of her friends, including Miles, the guy Ruby has long admired. After class, Mr. B invites Ruby and Miles to perform as a duet duo at the full concert. Ruby follows her father and brother to a fish store after school. Thankfully, Ruby's presence there prevents her father from being cheated by collectors who like to purchase their fish at the lowest cost. Ruby, of course, informs Leo. But Leo doesn't like it when Ruby renders him incapable of caring for it. Ruby and Leo advise their father to try selling their fish from the outset, but his father is more concerned that their fish will not sell well and that they will lose money. The next day, Mr. B takes Miles and Ruby to rehearse after choir class. Mr. B first assumes that they are exercising together, but due to their poor performance, they eventually acknowledge that they have their practices at their various locations. Mr. B is enraged because the duet duo should sing together, and he has instructed them both to sing more harmoniously. When Miles returns home, Mr. B asks about Ruby's intentions once she graduates. Ruby says that she will most likely work for her father because she does not have the money to pursue her studies. Mr. B says he taught Miles to get him into music college on a scholarship, and if Ruby wants to fight, he will help her since she has a good voice, and he will give his aid to train Ruby directly. Ruby tells her mother she is in the choir, but her mother says, "Would you paint if you are blind?" Ruby is irritated to hear that. She thinks that not everything she does has to be tied to her family. Ruby invites Miles to practice at her house one day. The arrival of Ruby and Miles is, of course, unbeknownst to Ruby's parents. They rehearse singing the song Mr. B requests in Ruby's room. They practice well at first until they accidentally hear Ruby's parents making strange sounds. Ruby is obliged to ask Miles to leave her house because she is ashamed. Ruby is then mocked joked by her classmates during lunch in the canteen. Ruby, of course, understands the meaning of their taunts and gestures and is irritated. Ruby leaves there, and Miles follows her to apologize. He acknowledges that he just told one of his buddies what happened in Ruby's house and has no clue how quickly the news spread out. It may be amusing to them, but it is not to Ruby. Ruby goes to Mr. B's residence in the afternoon for her first private practice. Ruby finds it hard at first to bring out the character of her good voice, but Mr. B has a unique way of creating, and Ruby delights with his training techniques. So that Ruby can fully utilize her skills, Ruby then follows her father to a gathering spot for fishermen with document management, where they discuss quota concerns and other topics. Frank attempts to talk while being translated by Ruby. The fishermen hear Frank's remarks. Frank indicates that he no longer wants to sell his fish to collectors. He and Leo also ask other fishermen to sell their fish together, with the possibility of their revenue being quadrupled. Of course, Frank's statements are only impulsive since he gets carried away. At home, they are concerned and dizzy about how they will get started. Frank instructs his wife to complete the books with the spouses of other fishermen since that is the only way they will accept. Following that, they began distributing brochures to persuade the fishermen to form a corporation together. They even rent an empty kiosk to get started. Ruby, despite her hectic schedule of assisting her family, remains focused on her singing lessons with Mr. B, although she appears to be late every day. Ruby is critical to the future of her family's business, since she is the only one who can connect with outsiders over the phone. However, it eventually irritates Mr. B since he believes Ruby insults him and wastes his time. Ruby apologizes and pledges not to repeat the mistake. When Ruby tries to arrive on time one day, her mother begs her not to go anywhere since they are going to be interviewed by the TV that afternoon because of the breakthrough they made to aid the fishermen. Ruby is unhappy at first since she has her own activity, but her mother persists because only Ruby can link them throughout this interview. As a result, Ruby is obliged to stay and assist her family in becoming the translator. Mr. B doesn't even want to answer the door of his residence because Ruby has arrived so late. So Ruby tries to apologize in school, but Mr. B claims that she isn't ready for this. He also states that Ruby will be unable to survive and compete in university with such discipline. Ruby then tries to talk to her family about her ambition to study at a prestigious music institution, claiming that her teacher at school will assist her in obtaining a scholarship. However, her parents believe that it is not the appropriate moment. They regard Ruby as the most significant member of the family business. But Ruby claims she is fatigued and that she can't let herself work as an interpreter for the rest of her life. Furthermore, she will not remain with them indefinitely. Ruby states that she enjoys singing, and that is an excellent chance for her. Ruby does not go fishing the next day since she is angry with her parents, so only Leo and Frank go to work. Unfortunately, a government observer is sent to their ship that day. Of course, they will be silent without Ruby. This observer's task is to watch whether or not they follow the rules correctly. When they are unable to answer the observer's inquiry, Frank scribbles something to inform them that they are deaf. The observer promptly notifies the Coast Guard after realizing Frank and Leo are deaf. The Coast Guard calls them by radio, but they can't hear the call and are so stopped and blacklisted. Miles attempts to apologize to Ruby for his past error. They spend time swimming in the lake after Ruby forgives Miles. Ruby notices her family is experiencing a new challenge after returning home. Frank's sailing license has been suspended, so he can't go fishing for some time. Ruby is blamed for the tragedy by her father and mother. But Leo attempts to defend Ruby by arguing that they should have a crew that can hear. Because Ruby isn't always able to accompany them, they are ultimately brought to trial a few days later. In addition to paying a $2,000 fine for sailing in an unsafe manner, they must also supply a crew who can answer radio calls and so on. Finding someone who can hear is easy, but finding someone with sign language abilities like Ruby is difficult. Ruby decides that night, after learning that Frank is planning to sell his yacht, that she will postpone her desire to attend college to help out with the family company. Leo opposes the decision, but Ruby is certain of her choice. Leo is enraged by his sister's decision and walks away from the table. Ruby talks to Leo the next day. He is still upset with Ruby, but what Leo says makes a lot of sense, because Ruby can't remain with her family forever. Ruby can really sing, according to a friend, and Leo encourages her to pursue her ambition. Leo says that, as a big brother, he could handle everything. The proof is that the family was okay before you arrived. Leo explains that he didn't want to be perceived as a pathetic guy due to his shortcomings. The annual fall concert of the high school choir begins. Ruby's family is also present, despite the fact that they are only able to watch. When the choral team performs, Frank and his wife Jackie can't stop talking about how lovely their daughter looks on stage. They also clap when other people do. When Ruby and Miles sing a duet on stage, Frank can't believe how wonderful Ruby's voice is. All he can do is stare at the other people watching his princess and their emotions of awe and respect, and some even fall into tears when they watch Ruby's performance. Frank and Jackie discover Ruby's true talent for singing at that moment. Following that, Mr. B attempts to make friends with Frank and Jackie, telling them that Ruby has a really excellent voice and that you two will regret not letting her go to college. But Ruby appears just to interpret the first statement. When Ruby returns home, she joins Frank outdoors, and Frank requests Ruby to tell him about the song she had performed earlier on stage. Ruby also states that the song expresses what it means to be dependent on others. Frank holds Ruby's neck and requests her to sing for him. Frank attempts to listen through the loud waves. Hearing his daughter sing immediately affected Frank. The next morning, Frank surprises everyone by announcing that they have all agreed to take Ruby to an audition for college. It is a last-minute decision, but they believe Ruby deserves this opportunity. Miles appears to have just completed his audition when she arrives. Unfortunately, he believes he has made a mistake and will flunk the audition. It was Ruby's turn to sing, and Mr. B arrived to accompany her with the sound of the piano. Ruby sings a song that she has been practicing for months. Ruby's performance with Mr. B is exceptionally great. It is really amazing for the examiners when she also explains the lyrics to her family, who are in the grandstand. Ruby continues to accompany her family to collect fish and manage the firm while waiting for the results of the campus selection. Family members are now attempting to be self-sufficient in the absence of Ruby. The day of the announcement comes, and Ruby is finally accepted to the university. Mr. B is happy with Ruby's accomplishments and never imagined that their efforts would be rewarded. With a sad heart, the day Ruby traveled to Boston for college dawned. Frank, Jackie, and Leo finally have to let Ruby leave to pursue her goals. Despite the Ruby family's flaws, no family is ideal. We will constantly bicker or fight, and we sometimes don't even communicate with one another. But in the end, family is still family, where love should have always been. Thanks for watching, and please subscribe to the channel.